Hey, before you hang up, say this.
Sure.
This is Steve Pavlina, and you're listening to Vroom, Vroom, Veer.
Do you want me to say it like that?
You say it how Steve says it.
Okay. This is Steve Pavlina, and you are listening to Vroom, Vroom, Veer.
Perfect.
Good. There
Thanks,
you go.
brother. Later.
Okay. All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Welcome to the show. Thanks for being here. Konnichiwa gozaimasu. So, this is me talking to Susie Miller of SusieMiller.com. Susie is a former therapist, now turned life coach. She's the better relationship coach is what she goes by. She's also an author. Her new book, Listen, Learn, Love. It came out on the 12th of May, so check that out. Wow, what a life Susie's had. Most of her rooming was of the fun, sort of going fast but having fun and enjoying life and working and being a mother. Her veers were all very dramatic. I don't want to bring any up on the pre because it'll be a spoiler. So she learned a lot from all of her veers. She's really been through the ringer. Very dramatic, life-changing events. Not for the faint of heart. She's been through the ringer. So strap in and get ready for some great stories about survival and just lots of tough times that Susie lived through and learned from. And she came out and smiling at the end. Well, not the end, at the where she is now. But she came out the other side, loving life and wanting to help people learn to listen, learn, and love. And she's helping people now through her coaching practice. And she's also speaking quite a bit too. So without further ado and without more of my yammering, let's get into my chat with Susie Miller of SusieMiller.com.
Are you ready to thoughtfully steer away from your revved up, frenzied, and far too often scripted life? Then welcome to Vroom Vroom Veer with Jeff Smith, where he guides you down the road differently traveled by sharing unique experiences with guests who have managed to shift away from a life stuck on cruise control and veered their way into a more authentic and fulfilling one in all sorts of interesting and kind of remarkable ways. Get ready to Vroom Vroom Veer with your differently traveled road chauffeur, Jeff Smith.
Hi, Susie. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited about your new show and the concept that you're developing here. I'm really excited to be on it.
Yeah, it's evolving for me too. It's and I'm glad because it doesn't feel niche-y to me.
No, I think it's universal.
Yeah, I think it's relatable.
That's a great word. And I do a lot with relationships as the better relationship coach. And one of the things I love about your show is it really invites people to think about their stories. And our story and what affects us impacts everything, our success, our relationships, and even how we feel about ourselves.
And people really, I think it's a primary learning method.
Yeah.
And it's not an in-your-face, it's not preachy, judgy.
No.
It's just sharing.
I love that.
It's just... Everybody's the same. We're all slops, okay? And, some of us put some makeup on it, but...
Well, someday I'm going to write a book called I'm a Mess, You're a Mess, and It's Okay.
It's okay. Yes. So true.
Did you see that StoryCorps just won the TEDx prize or the TED prize for 2015?
No.
So StoryCorps is their big thing. It's about capturing stories. So look them up.
Okay.
And they just won the TED Prize, and now there's an app. And why it caught my eye is because I'm so committed to helping people understand their stories.
Okay.
So this is a great show for that.
Yeah, it's all about story.
Yep.
Yeah, and I like it because it's easy for me. I don't have to come up with questions or nothing.
I did notice that in the prep work.
I basically make my my interviewees and guests do all the work. Skype is PMSing.
Seriously.
Let's just try audio only. Maybe we don't have enough bandwidth between us.
And see, girls can say that. Guys can't say that, but girls can say that.
What would be the guy equivalent to PMSing?
Well, I'm saying guys could never say, "Oh,
You're
are
right.
you PMSing?" Because girls would smack them.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
I have to think about that. Nothing quick.
Yeah, right.
Moody or something. I have to think about that. Because we know you do it. We just don't have a category for it yet.
Yeah. When my wife is PMSing, we call it Aunt Flo, and when I have sympathetic PMS, it's called Uncle Joe.
That is great. That's just great. I love that.
Okay, so let's get into your story.
Okay.
So let's talk about one of your Vroom Vroom Veer stories, and we had a little pre-show chat, so you primed me a little bit. So the first story had to do with when you were starting a new business with your husband, and this was the first time you had started a business together. Did I get that right?
So we married young, my husband John and I, and he had come from an entrepreneurial family. And the big joke we had was every time I had a baby, he had a new retail store. Or he started a new retail store. So we were 3 babies in, and we were done. And this was his fourth store. And I was really excited because we were going to get to do this together. And it was a gift store venture back in the days before Target and Michael's, when most of the stores were boutique stores, and Hallmark was the big chain. And so we took some of our favorite things about stores, and we were going to put them together. We had signed a lease at the beginning of October, and we had planned to open at Thanksgiving. So we were in warp speed, not just Vroom speed, but warp speed. But we were having a blast.
Right.
We were having a blast. I mean, we went to trade shows in New York together. I got to be the buyer, the merchandiser. I mean, with any startup, you're everything. Well, I got to call myself the merchandiser and the head of buying.
You were making up new job titles for yourself.
I did. I really did. And one time we were having a discussion about where some merchandise should go, and I looked at my husband and said, "I'm the merchandiser."
That's my gig, baby.
We were having a ball, even with our kids. So they were involved in it. So it was a family affair. And that was back in the eras of Beanie Babies. Do you remember Beanie Babies?
I do. Those are great.
Okay, so they were the rage, and they were selling like hotcakes. And seriously, the collectible prices on those were going up by the day. And what was really fun is we had them early. So we actually had like all of the ones that people wanted, which was really fun.
That's cool. So, okay, so that was your Vroom. So
yeah.
Go ahead.
So anyway, we had them all because we were on the front end. And I did want to share this with you because this was part of the Vroom that was so fun for me.
Okay.
Our kids were part of it. Our oldest loved all the books. Our middle child, I'll never forget. I have this visual image of her, little petite 8-year-old, sitting on this really big stool at the counter, counter height, running the cash register. I mean, she loved numbers then. It was in a very well-to-do neighborhood, this store was, and we had regular customers, and they loved coming and seeing Emily, and she still loves math. She teaches math. So even though life was busy and chaotic, it was fun, and we were in a rhythm, and it moved out of warp speed to reasonable speed, or reasonable room, and it was just a really exciting time for our family.
Yeah, it does sound like fun.
Yeah, until one night it all changed.
Yeah. So, okay. So this was more of a, not all Veers need to necessarily be an emergency or a crisis, but sometimes they are. And the way I like to describe a Veer is it's just sometimes life will throw you a curveball and you've got to deal with it. And that might be a crisis. And in your case, it was in the form of a drunk driver. So tell us a little bit about what happened.
Well, it was raining one night in May, and kind of life as we knew it came to a screeching halt. A drunk driver ran a red light and totaled my Volvo wagon, and it was less than a mile from my home. So I was knocked out because it was a double impact. He hit me, and because of the rain, we spun, and I hit him again. But I remember coming to, and as I was coming to, I saw the engine smoking, and I thought the engine was on fire. And I was terrified because a few years earlier, we actually had a house fire, and I'd watched a car actually burn in our garage. So as I'm coming to and seeing the smoke coming out of the engine, I was desperate to get out of the car, and the door was stuck. So, you know, Volvos, they're like a tank. They're built for safety to stand up to crashes.
Right.
So I'm slamming I'm not aware that I'm hurt yet. I'm slamming myself against the door to push it open because I was determined to crack it enough to squeeze out before the car caught fire because I had terror inside me because of what happened earlier. And so eventually I was able to get out. I was in shock. I didn't realize how badly I was injured. But a neighbor had heard the crash, and so they came out pretty quickly. 911 was there. And honestly, I don't remember a whole lot about that night, but I know I was taken to the ER. I remember the doctor kind of took my hand, and he looked at me, kind of shook his head, and he said, you're really lucky. God and Volvo saved your life.
The Volvo saved your life? Is that what he said?
He said, God and Volvo saved your life.
Okay. Yeah, your phone just kind of cut out there I missed the God part.
Want me to say that again? See that line again?
Yeah, no, I got it the second time. It was God and Volvo saved your life.
Yeah.
So you had we were talking about this a little bit in the pre-show chat, and I think it's important to recognize when a miracle happens. And, I believe in everyday miracles, but I also believe in those sorts of undeniable miracles. And I've had those in my life too. So that's amazing. All right. So it was a miracle just for you to survive, but then it changed your life too.
Right. So the miracle of surviving was one kind of moment, but the bigger part of the Veer was how bad my injuries were. The goal for my first 6 weeks of physical therapy, once some of the swelling went down and the injuries were able to allow me to move, was to stand up straight. So for 6 weeks, they worked just to get me vertical again.
Wow.
So it was a huge Veer. I lost my health. I mean, at that point, I was a runner. I lost my ability to be active in the business with my husband. My kids were scared, because they just woke up the next morning and their mom was on the couch, pretty banged up and, on a lot of pain meds. And so it really shifted our family. The next year was sucked up with major therapy, physical therapy, a number of surgeries. And then the second year was more of the stability and the rebuilding, but really it was a lot of physical limitations that I've talked about since then as a time that really radically altered my life. And they did tell me that some of the injuries will, come with me forever. There's some back injuries that I still deal with. So and again, how do you not be grateful for a miracle to come alive? So yay. I mean, that's awesome. And at the same time, there's an and I know, in my own personal story and in my work with people, there's this idea of can we be grateful for all that's good and still be honest about what's hard?
Right. That's true. That is difficult because you don't want to seem ungrateful for the miracle.
Right. But I really got my life back.
Yeah. At some point, that's something that you're authentically going to be pissed at the universe at some point there. Yeah. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that because I totally believe that all feelings are valid, Oh,
I do too. I tell people all the time, feelings are. You just feel them and then you decide what to do with them.
Right.
I think sometimes people don't make an intelligent decision what to do with them. So yes, I was mad, but taking that madness out on my kids or not getting over it and letting it make me bitter for 25 years is foolishness. So, I'm very big into the reality of, life is both and. It's not all sunshine and roses, but it's not all awful either.
Right. Yeah, and you just have to learn, I think and I know you know this, but learning to process emotions and not suppress them or avoid them or hide from them, that's huge.
I love that you said that, Jeff, because number one, you're a guy, and I don't mean not to be sexist, but I love that you're talking about feelings because a lot of guys I work with don't, and at the same time, there's this illustration I use in my upcoming book, and it's how feelings and emotions are like a beach ball. If we try to suppress them, it's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. They pop up somewhere. So it's kind of like, the man who has a bad day at work but doesn't, yells at his wife who after the kid who kicks the dog, like, if we don't deal with our emotions, no matter what they are, the hard ones, they stay with us. So I love that you brought that up.
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge. So another one of your vroom periods was while you decided to go back to school and do grad school. So talk a little bit about that vroom period.
Well, after my accident, we homeschooled our kids for a while because it'd been a pretty chaotic time with the fire and then the shop chaos and then my accident. And so they were reeling a little bit. They were young.
Right.
And so we just felt like there should be some time together. And so we just kind of circled the wagons and hung out for a year or two. And we knew they'd go back to public school. We just kind of wanted to get things leveled out. And one night I was talking about John about, so what am I going to do when they go back to school? Because that was like a full-time thing to be a mom and a wife and a homeschooler. And he said to me, why don't you go to grad school? You've wanted to go for years and this could be the right time. And it was a huge surprise because back when in my early 20s, I had gone to counseling to deal with some impact of being abused as a child. And not by any immediate family members. I feel like I have to say that to protect the innocent.
Okay.
But I was really helpful and I was really grateful. And so I knew it was something I wanted to do with my life someday. I had spent years volunteering and getting trained as a lay counselor or church counselor.
Right.
And we just put off because we were having kids, that would be something we do later. And so this was it. I was going to get to go to grad school. And the specific program that I wanted to attend, however, was located all the way across the country in Seattle. So I had no idea how this was going to work because we were in D.C.
Yeah. Okay.
So John made a great case. He was like, okay, Target and Michael's are popping up like weeds and the retail businesses are taking a hit. He was down to one location and he said, I'll just promote somebody to run the daily operations and we'll go to Seattle. You'll go to school. I'll be Mr. Mom. I'll telecommute, fly back when I need to. So it was a great, the Veer led to a great room for me because we, I feel like Beverly Hillbillies. We loaded up our stuff and moved to Beverly. We rented our home. We put all of our stuff in storage. We had a 5-bedroom home in the suburbs, like all good,
East
people
Coasters, right?
East Coasters, right. The suburban sprawl they call a virus. We put most of our stuff in storage. Go ahead.
No, that's cool.
We packed up our family, packed up a U-Haul and a minivan, and drove across the country for 2 years. And I literally, Jeff, was in Vroom heaven.
Yeah, that sounds like a blast.
Yeah.
2 years of grad school in Seattle.
Yes. Seattle's beautiful.
It's amazing.
And you walk out.
Good workout just walking around.
You do. And you walk out your door and you go, oh, because it's so
green.
Majestic.
Yes.
Yeah. And so laid back compared to DC.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I was in school. I ended up deciding to get 2 masters at the same time because I could, kind of combine them. I could. And I loved it. It was really, really fun. And to this day, our kids will still tell stories about their dad being Mr. Mom, the best dinners ever, hot dogs and tater tots,
and chocolate cake.
Yeah. When we came back home, they were like, Mom, can Dad still make dinner? He makes the best dinners. You're not taking that back over, are you?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So he did lots of stuff with them. I didn't do as much with them because I studied and went to school, but they weren't lacking because they had their dad.
Sure.
So it was a really fun time.
Right. And then?
Then we moved back to DC. And so my room kind of continued, but it was not quite as hectic as going to school. My plan was to open my private practice and work part-time. And I had 2 classes to finish on my theology degree.
Okay.
And so I was going to do that down in the DC area, right down in the hub of the city. And so I was going to get to have more time with my kids. It was kind of that trade-off of a really intense time of being less available, but their dad was 100% available. And now I was going to be really available with them. And they were entering middle school. And I have a very big theory about middle schoolers and high schooler kids need their parents as much as toddlers do.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So my room was firing on all cylinders. It was great. And then 9/11 hit.
Wow. Okay. And where were you now? Were you in D.C. area?
On 9/11, I actually was downtown in the city of Washington, D.C.
Whoa.
My family, my kids were in school in the suburbs. My husband was at home working from home. I remember driving home. It was interesting. Our class was in the basement, and it was from 9 to 10 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And so we didn't hear anything happening until we came up at 10 o'clock.
Wow.
And, the city had erupted.
Yeah. I was there.
So I got him. Oh, you were? Where were you?
I was in Falls Church, Virginia, taking a course for computer security. And, and I was in Falls Church, Virginia, and
that's about 15 minutes from where we live.
Yeah, the building that we were in and doing the class was run by the ATF and FBI.
Oh goodness!
and they closed the building down, and we had to kill the class, and the FBI and ATF started a command post in our hotel across the parking lot, right? And all I wanted to do was drink.
I'll bet. I think, there's a joke about how many 9/11 babies, the whole population boom that happened,
right,
that.
Right after. Yeah, because everybody was scared. That's scared sex. That's great.
It was scared sex. Comfort sex. So we call it comfort sex.
Okay. All right.
So it was a national Veer,
Exactly.
And I remember
it was a national Veer.
It was.
I
Everybody
was freaked
had
out.
Well, and even it didn't matter where you lived. I mean, New York really felt it.
Right.
In ways that we'll never understand.
I saw smoke. I could see where the smoke from the Pentagon.
Yeah. I drove home. Yeah. I drove by the Pentagon. And,
oh, my God.
It turns out later, the man that my husband started working with, and I'll tell you about that, actually walked out of the Pentagon that day. And so we drove by, and you could just see the panic in people's faces. So we were 4 lanes of traffic wide, if you've ever been to DC, and gridlock, and everybody was kind of looking at everybody, really trying to make sure that, nobody was going to bomb them. Where was the next plane coming from?
Right.
I'm driving by National Airport
like we
wondering.
Were at war.
Yes. And I'm ethnic. This is kind of another kind of bizarre twist to that. My dad is from India.
Okay.
And so after 9/11, I was profiled a lot.
Oh, wow.
Because I looked very Middle Eastern.
Sure. Yikes.
So, so that was kind of weird. And what happened for us with that Veer was at the same time 9/11 was already kind of happening and the economy was kind of falling. There was a sniper in the DC area terrorizing the DC area.
That was crazy.
It was crazy. Our kids, they would lock them down in school. They weren't allowed to be in the yard. And literally in the DC area, kind of like 30 miles outside encompasses Maryland and Virginia. And he was crafty. He wasn't in one place.
Right. He was moving around a lot.
He was. And people lived in terror. So there was a little bit of a, the country pulling together from 9/11 and really that, proud to be an American feeling. And yet the terror of this sniper. And I remember my kids saying to me, Mom, is it safe for us to go to school? And that's such a hard thing in the moment as a mom, because I really, I remember looking at them thinking, I got to tell them yes, because if I tell them I think so, they're going to carry the fear. But if I tell them yes, I'll carry the fear. And it's kind of like that, you have to be bigger than your kid to be able to go, yeah, I promise you'll be okay. Knowing that if something goes wrong, you'll deal with it, but they're not equipped to handle that worry. So they went to school, everybody was in lockdown. One of the shootings was across the street in the parking lot from my husband's store, the one remaining store, and the business fell through the floor. They just shut it down. People weren't going out. And so after surveying that landscape, he decided to close his business. And so the Veer that was a national Veer of 9/11 turned into a very personal Veer for us with his business closing and then my plans to be a kind of low-key starting business, part-time counselor to a full-time gig because my income now mattered.
Right.
So
that's a big deal.
Yeah. So much for all of my laid back kid time since I'd been so busy for 2 years. So that Veer was pretty, it was hard on my kids. I ramped up my private practice to full time. I was really blessed with clients. So I ended up with like a 6-month waiting list. So how do you be happy that people need therapy? But I was really grateful.
You're sharing your gift.
Thank you. Yes.
Is the answer.
Yeah. Yes. And I began to, interestingly enough, I worked with a 9/11 family whose father was on the plane that went down into the Pentagon, and that was a real privilege. And then I worked with the man who walked out of the Pentagon. So it was a privilege to be trusted with people's stories and walk through what one of my clients calls the mud with them, slog through the mud. And so I started my speaking and talked about relationships. So I was, again, in that tension of loving being a mom and loving being a career woman, successful, but always that guilt of where I'm not with my kids, and they didn't, they didn't care nearly as much as I did because they were in their teenage years and they're like, Mom, we're glad you're not home.
Right. That moment when teenagers want absolutely nothing to do with their parents.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was a really odd season. Again, a couple of blessings in the Veer, and I think we talked about this earlier. You have to be able to see the good with the bad. I'm a very both and kind of girl, and so John was able to be home in the days, and I worked when they were in school, and then John started another company. And so this company did operations for small entrepreneurs. You know how startups, entrepreneurs, we love the stuff we love and we hate the rest of it.
Right. Yes.
And so he loves the rest of it. He loves that. So he started filling the role of the COO for small businesses and entrepreneurs, kind of establishing systems, maintaining systems, running HR. And it took off, so that I was able to then, have less
dial back
chaos.
a little bit. Yeah.
That's a great way to say it. I was able to dial back, and our life kind of came into what I call that coasting room you mentioned on your website.
Yeah. Yeah. There's all different sorts of vrooming and there's all sorts of different kinds of veering.
Yeah.
For the sake of the show, I kind of highlight the negative of vroom vroom and the positive of veer, but that's just a simplification to keep things brandy.
Well, and it's really a twist on the head because we think that vroom vroom is the good time.
Okay.
And
yeah, there's nothing wrong with that.
Well, no, I like that you said that. There's a negative to it because we lose track of things, and really good things can come from the veers. My husband still has that business today, and it's a blessing. Right. And it's a great, it allowed me to ramp up my speaking career and eventually make some other changes.
If I had to say that there's one characteristic between them is I think if in your vroom vrooms as you're vrooming, the more awareness and consciousness that you can plug into that vrooming, I think the better off everybody's going to be. Because that's what veers do. They wake you up, and they grab you by the collar and shake you.
Well, and you don't kind of vroom the same anymore. You don't breakneck speed of starting a business looked very different when it meant giving up time with my kids. After, a life-threatening accident, you look at life really differently and suddenly your priorities shift. And so I think there really can be some good veers that come out of it. But then they don't have to stall you, but they can certainly inform, like you said, be mindful in your next season of Vroom.
Right. Yes. And it's not like you can stop. It's our nature to automate behavior. It's just the way the human brain works. Like I said, so you mentioned that sometimes the veers are the taps of God's taps on your shoulder. Yes.
And so, even as I was thinking through the show, some of those, they're very meaningful in life. They may not create as great a story in terms of, the context, but even in what I just shared, there was this kind of tapping of God on John's shoulder going, hey, this is time to close the business. And did it result in some other things that, initially were hard? Sure. But did it lead us down a new path? Absolutely.
Right. And I think what God is trying to teach you is to attune your listening skills.
I love that. I love that you said that. Because when you hear the title of my book, you're going to be like, I'm already smart. My book's titled Listen, Learn, Love. And listen is the first skill for every relationship to be good. And I think that includes the relationship we have with ourselves. We have to listen to our lives and listen to our stories.
Yes. Yeah. And another one of my guests, Jim Palmer.
I knew Jim.
Yeah, I know you do.
He's a great guy.
Yeah, he is a great guy. He talked about how he was getting his taps. And I'll long story short it. I'll short the story. But, he was getting all sorts of quiet taps about it. Jim, it's time for you to move into this next phase of your life where you're doing your own thing and sharing your gifts with the world. And then here's a tap. You lose your job. He didn't get fired. Right. He was laid off.
Right.
And then he was like, well, I'll get another job. And then he was like, no. Okay, have cancer.
Well,
Right.
and sometimes those taps or those things that we don't listen to that end up kind of smacking us upside the head, you go,
Right.
okay, I get it, you know?
Right. It's like if you don't listen to the taps, eventually they're going to be a 2x4.
Yes. I tend to be a slow learner in that realm, I've found.
Okay, so your last story starts when you're in more of a flowy cruise mode of rooming. Mm-hmm. It was kind of happy. So start there and then move on to your next Veer.
Sure. I call those years the in the soup years. We're out of the weeds of toddlerhood, but we're in the soup of teens, college applications. I mean, we were loving life.
Yeah.
Making plans. And one afternoon in October during a routine checkup, the doctor found a lump in my neck.
Whoa. In your neck?
In my neck.
Yikes. So was that, what sort of cancer was that?
Well, it was thyroid cancer. So what happened is they find a lump and they're like, oh, it could be a cyst.
Right.
Okay,
right.
Let's test it. So you go and have it tested. Then you wait.
Right.
Then they do another test because they're like, well,
they don't want to freak out right away.
Right. But let's test these. And then the results came back and we found out it was thyroid cancer. And that was pretty huge because my dad died from cancer when I was just 27 years old.
Wow.
And the other part that was really hard was the doctors, they had no idea how bad it was because there were some complications. One of them was I had a rare type of thyroid cancer because, without being medical, it just was a rare manifestation of this type of cancer.
Okay.
And the tumor looked like it was and your thyroid's near your vocal cords. And I speak for a living.
Right.
So talk about a Veer.
That's a little scary.
Yeah, the C word. We walked around, nobody likes to deal with cancer. And the C word, even though mine was a very treatable cancer.
Okay, good.
We still had to deal with that. I actually did a bunch of research and found that this guy at Sloan Kettering, this doctor there, was very well skilled in this type of, complicated surgery. And yet we didn't know how serious it was. And so I met with him. I went up to New York and I met with him and he said, if you have to have cancer, thyroid cancer is one of the better ones because it's treatable. And that might sound so bizarre to say, Jeff, but when you're in a hospital, Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, of children walking in who have bone cancer and, life-threatening cancer and babies with bald heads because they're undergoing chemo, hearing that from a doctor who walks in that world, you're like, okay, whew.
Yeah. Right.
And so he's like, it's treatable. We don't know what that will look like. We don't know the prognosis, but because it's treatable, let's wait till after Christmas to do the surgery. So in between that time, there's this, okay, and I got to wait more, the exams, the tests, the worry. And I think the hardest part is the waiting and not knowing.
Oh yeah. That's the worst.
Yeah. One night,
it's always the worst.
Yeah, it ages you.
You're going to assume the worst.
And you work really hard not to. And, people want to help and ask questions. You're like, I don't know. One night, my husband and I were snuggled up on the sofa, and he looked at me with tears in his eyes. And he said, I don't want to have to imagine my life without you. I'm really scared. And that, he's more of a stoic kind of guy, very solid, very steady. And it made me think about how rarely you hear about how hard cancer is on the spouse.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So fast forward, my surgery did actually reveal that my thyroid was cancerous and bad. They had to take it out. It was in my lymph nodes, but they weren't sure how far it would had spread. So they're like, it could be nothing. It could be more. So go home. We'll call you.
That's the worst.
It is the worst.
That's
so I go home.
Worst.
Yeah. And thyroid cancer, they cut all the muscles in your neck. And I don't know if you ever read Harry Potter, but there's a character in Harry Potter called Nearly Headless Nick. And his head's hanging on by a thread. And that's how you feel. You feel like your head's going to fall off the back of you.
Oh, geez.
And so it's this bizarre feeling.
You mean the muscles in the front, like up by your throat, basically?
They've cut them all. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. That's
to get
awful.
behind them. Yeah. To the thyroid. Yeah. What's really funny is one of my daughters, you kind of look like you have a Frankenstein scar across your neck.
Wow.
You know,
Yeah.
vertically she drew one with Sharpie on her neck in solidarity.
Oh, you kind of remind me of Clint Eastwood and Hang 'em High.
Yeah.
We can laugh about it now.
Now, right. Yeah.
Right.
So Friday afternoon, I got the call, and it was the nurse, and she said, they've got it all. No more treatments necessary, no more surgery. Just need to, do some tests and follow up.
Right.
So we had that celebrate good times evening.
Right.
It was fabulous. We were very, very grateful and very, very excited. And then, so Monday afternoon, the phone rang, and it was Sloan Kettering on my caller ID. And so I answered all happy and grateful in my cancer-free, happy voice, expecting instructions about who I should see in DC.
Right.
Right. It was the surgeon. Well, surgeons don't make calls. And he started with the words, "I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. There's been a mistake.
Oh, no.
They read the wrong test. Your cancer has spread to more nodes. We need you to come back for treatment."
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Well, at least you had a weekend of partying.
It sucked because it was
you thought you were all relieved and it was over and
right.
And then,
it's interesting that you said that. Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's interesting that you said that because for me, I was so mad that I got the relief because it was such a brutal, no, you have it. So I almost wish I hadn't gotten the other call.
Right.
And partially too, because my kids were like, "Mom's okay. Yay."
Right.
And,
and
I
you're
turned around.
Facebooking and everybody's like, woo. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, the way that Veer continued was with thyroid cancer, they don't do chemo. They do this radioactive iodine.
Okay.
And the whole process of preparing for that, for your body, you have to basically shut your body down. And your thyroid is the huge regulator of your mood and sanity.
Right.
So over the course of 2 months, it's like having PMS and loony bin on steroids. You're literally going out of your mind just to prep for the treatment.
Wow.
So, I've got teenagers who are like, "What's wrong with mom?" I'm like, "Oh my gosh,
Now,
I look like go ahead."
My wife had a thing with her thyroid where it was either hypo or hyper. I think she was hypoactive.
Yep.
Where it was like swelling up.
That's hyperactive.
Okay.
Great.
Hyper.
Yeah.
And then she was just like no energy.
That's right.
So where were you? Did you have those symptoms too?
Yes, I laid on the big chair, exhausted.
Right.
Because
zero
it basically
energy. Right.
Zero
it just
energy.
Zaps all of your strength.
Right, with teenagers and a private practice. So you have no energy, and because your thyroid,
you're going through it there, honey.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and for your
you're
wife,
like Job.
Yeah.
All
she
right.
probably had
You're having faith.
Yeah, she had some of the mental kind of. It's just it's like a fog. It's very bizarre.
My wife had to take off work and everything, and eventually. They got her meds right and everything worked out where she didn't have to have the surgery and
which is great.
Yeah. She's been on the same medication now for years and everything, everything seems okay. She seems a little normal like, so
normal.
No, I mean, really.
Right.
And then every once in a while, it's like the doctor will say, we need to relook at your meds. And you're not supposed to be on these meds a long time.
Right.
And they always want to do surgery. And I'm like, say no.
Well, and it really is a catch-22 because sometimes the treatments were not, with cancer, it's not worse than the disease. But, so this will be 30 years now. I was on thyroid medicine before. I'm on really high doses now. And so the doctors say that these aren't good for you. But if you go off them, you could be worse.
And the thing is my sister had the surgery to where they took out most of the thyroid.
Right.
And so she has to take drugs, the hormone replacement.
Right.
Right. And to me, it's like listen to the body sort of wisdom.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
really.
Don't rock the boat.
Right.
And are they trying to sell me something here?
Right. Oh, yeah. Well, and once she got regulated, she probably felt like a new person, your wife.
Right.
Yeah,
she went back to work and she's working out and she's normal.
Right. Well, fast forward, the treatment worked. I hit the 2-year mark cancer-free. But I ended up being chronically ill because the treatment had damaged my immune system and my lungs.
Right.
So
The treatment is always worse than that cure.
Right.
I mean,
well, yes, except for, right. How do you say, no, I don't want the treatment for cancer. I'm young. I have I have kids in their teens. I don't want cancer to spread. I went ahead and did the treatment.
I get it. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, it's just a hard call.
It is.
And they don't tell you that going in. Like, it's like, oh yeah, there's a small percentage that it could have these effects. And you sign, your firstborn in your life and away when they do the treatment. So, it really did damage my lungs and my immune system. And this is probably where I learned the most from the Veer, because I ended up battling chronic illness for about 7 years. And every reprieve I would get, I'd start trying to work again at thinking I was better.
Right.
And I'm talking, my lungs were so I had bronchitis every month. My lungs were so bad. I had pneumonia, or I couldn't walk up the stairs because I couldn't breathe, I was just chronically ill with infections.
So, woof.
Yeah, it was awful. And it really does sound like this tragedy. But what was really interesting was I would have these reprieves. I'd get better and I'd think, oh, it's gone. Now I've finally healed. And I would start working again. And you know what I would do? I would hit, Vroom 110%. I'm slow learner.
Yeah. You didn't have that. You didn't have a motor to do that anymore, basically.
No. And so I would crash and I'd be sick again.
Right.
And, I try another treatment and I would do that. And so this cycle through all these treatments, and it would, the sickness would return, and dealing with the ramifications of whatever treatment to kill the cancer in my body. And so I learned that it was time to stop pretending that my life hadn't been impacted. It was time, and this is really funny because, therapists live in denial. Don't let anybody ever tell you any different.
It's not just a river in Egypt, you mean?
It's not just a river in Egypt. While we help everybody get out of denial, we have our own. So I kept thinking, I'm fine.
Yeah.
So, over time, I learned to level out. I actually shifted from therapy to coaching because it's less stressful.
Right.
And it's really much better. Stress isn't great for maintaining your health.
Yeah. You're my second therapist turned coach that I've had now on the show.
Yeah, it's a great, great freedom.
Because I studied psychology, I only did the bachelor's level.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I learned I didn't really want to do anything after that. If I did anything, I looked at and was really sort of enamored with positive psychology.
I love that.
Right.
I love that.
But not the dark side.
Well, and most people go into the dark side because they've walked in and somebody helped them.
Yeah.
Well, their money is. No, it's where they, I think that's more of a calling. You do that because you feel compelled. But
it's like the path. It's the path that's laid out there.
That's true.
I mean, when you're basically, my bachelor's in psychology was, like 2 years of sales, and, each different discipline within psychology was trying to, lure you into their world.
Right. Well, I would pick over anything positive psychology now because I have learned a lot about the brain and neuroplasty and quantum physics in my shift to coaching. But I also love coaching because it really gives me more freedom. I'm not bound by geography. There's a lot more leeway in the kind of relationships you can have with your clients. You can actually, more than just that.
You don't have all those legal things.
Yes, and you get to You get to work. I work with clients who need tweaking. They want better relationships, but they're not, one step away from, divorce, or they're not dealing with a lot of psychoses.
They're not necessarily in crisis. They're okay, and they're trying to go from, good to great, or okay to better.
Right. Or they're just on the verge. They can see a crisis on that. Like I deal with a lot of people when their kids hit their teens, and it's suddenly all of there's some stress in their marriage.
Emptiness coming.
Right. Or entrepreneurs who don't tend their relationships while they're growing their business. So it's just more positive. I love it. But what I learned to do was say no. I learned, like you said earlier, to be mindful and be aware. Yeah. And I began to work through this idea of, lots of things are good, but you got to be willing to give up the good to get to the great. And so I call that the deeper yes.
Yes. I love that.
Yeah. So I prioritize my clients. I'm selective with my speaking engagements. My husband and I travel.
You want to run your motor at 40%.
Right. But that was really
focus
hard.
on your self-care.
Right. That's a really hard shift for me. And I would say, as I look over the Veers, that was a big lesson. If you can't go 110% all the time, hair on fire, and expect to have quality of life.
And
right.
that's a mantra that I'm trying to embed in my message, because Chris Brogan actually did a whole thing on that, and that last year's podcast movement. And he did the analogy of, if you get a new car and you run it at 100%, it's going to blow up. You need to dial down and get to like a nice, in the military on an airplane, when you're at cruising speed, they call that mil power. And it's right where the motor wants to be.
Okay, yeah.
to cruise,
Yeah, it's interesting because I talk a lot about that, not just in terms of personal, but in terms of relationships. Because I think especially with business folks, we get to a place where we're so ramped up, startups, and so busy building that we don't remember to make time or do, at least some energy. And I think it's hard to say to somebody, oh, you should always do 45. Because sometimes you need to be 60, but you can't be 60 or 110 forever.
Yeah.
There's times for massive actions. There's times for it to be much, quieter. So, for me, that was a lesson. It really was the ebbs and flows and evaluating things versus jumping into things because they sound good or they, they're great. That sounds like something I want to do. And my mom always says to me, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yeah, I think... the more you slow down, you're actually, you can get more done if you do it right.
Yeah.
Because like those strategic no's, and you're unbusying yourself, and you're building your energy to where, if you keep your steady state at around 40%, and then you need to surge, you've got capacity.
That's very well said. That's very well said.
Right? Do you get what I mean? Does that make sense?
I do.
Okay.
I think that's very well said. It makes total sense. Yeah.
That's what the military does. They don't. They have surge capability, but they don't run there. Because if you run there, then it becomes a new normal.
Yeah, and then you break down. Our bodies aren't meant for that.
You just burn out.
Right.
Yeah.
But I may use that in some of my relationship work because I like that idea of knowing there's going to be seasons of surge. But if you're mindful of them and you've put a lot of...
You need to build that capacity so it's there.
Right. That's that's brilliant. I really like that. I will
thank
quote
the military. There you go. I didn't make it up.
Well, it's very helpful. And I think that looking at and this is the hard part, is as you get older, you get wiser. And, there's that movie, It's a Wonderful Life. And there's that scene where he's like, youth is wasted on the young. And I'm like, I want the energy of youth with the wisdom I have now.
Right. Don't we all?
Yeah. And maybe not so many of the wrinkles,
Yeah, there you go. Hey, Susie, thank you so much for being on my show. I have to let you go. I have another call in a minute.
Yeah, me too. That's great.
This worked out in the end as soon as we got the audio stuff worked through.
Yeah.
So I'm putting you on my recall list.
Okay, thank you. And then do you want to know about the freebies I'm going to offer your people?
Sure, shoot.
Okay, so you can tell them where to find me, SusieMiller.com.
Yep, SusieMiller.com. That's SUSIE Miller.com.
There you go, and you'll find freebies. And if you do SusieMiller.com/VVV for Veer, Vroom, Veer.
I love it. Thank you.
There'll be a special thing for your audience. And my first book is going to be available, probably in May, around the time you're launching. It's called Listen, Learn, Love. And it's all about how to create better relationships in 30 days or less.
From the awesome Susie Miller.
Yeah. And you can go to listenlearnlovebook.com for some free bonuses for that in the first month or two it's out. So I really enjoyed being on your show, and I'm really excited about this concept. And I just want to thank you for having me as a guest.
Thank you so much. You're enjoyed it immensely. Let's do it again.
All right, great. Thanks. And hey, I'm really trying to book some podcasts up, so feel free to refer me.
Okay. Yeah. And if you need help doing anything, just reach out.
I will. Thank you so much.
Okay.
All right. Take care. Good to meet you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
thanks for taking the time to ride along with us on another episode of Vroom Vroom Veer. For podcast info and show notes, be sure to head over to vvveer.com. That's VVER.com. Man, that's fun to say. And we'll catch up with you next time here on Vroom Vroom Veer.